Hi, I'm John. Uh, Initially, I had planned on making some videos about leadership and kind of my journey of going through being a new supervisor where I work. Uh, but there's some recent events and maybe not so recent events that have kind of changed what I find is a priority to me. Um, 2025 has been like an extremely tough year, not just everything that's going on in the world, but stuff that's going on, at home with family and everything. So just planning on doing these video vlogs, I guess, to kind of work through and kind of get some of my feelings out and my anxieties and kind of my regrowth, I guess, as to the better and brighter version of myself. So I guess I'll start off on like what kind of happened in the last year. So in 2024, towards the end, sometime in December, I took a pretty high promotion into a supervisory job at where I work, which I'm not going to go too much into. Um, our department where I work at has kind of gone through a lot of pain and suffering, I guess I would say, over the past 3, 4, maybe 5 years. It's kind of hard to tell. COVID kind of helped make all that time kind of blend together, so it's kind of difficult to tell like when all of our struggles kind of initiated. Um, so I've been in that job now for since December, and now it's August, so about 8-ish months, give or take. I've kind of put myself into this like weird position of trying to be everyone's go-to, not necessarily on purpose, but that's just kind of like, I guess, me as a person with my work ethic that I've always appreciated making sure stuff is done and getting stuff done right. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to set boundaries, and that's kind of caused a lot of issues. Not just with work or anything. Work has actually been fine, but actually at home, I haven't set any like standard like good boundaries of like when I need space and everything. Um, so that's always been kind of like a struggle. It's kind of setting those boundaries, but I think that's something everyone kind of struggles with. The other thing that's kind of happened in 2025, which is probably the one that's hitting me the most, and I think it's hitting me the most probably for more than like one or two reasons, and that is that my mom has been diagnosed with dementia, and initially I didn't think that this was going to be hitting me as hard because my mom and I not necessarily as close as we were. There's been some things over the past couple of years that have kind of happened. And I think that goes back to her, like her personality and kind of some of the trauma that she's kind of put on me and my sister at least. But it's honestly like extremely hard to kind of watch her mother deteriorate so bad that she can't remember who she's talking to, or her own son's name, and then she kind of like phases in and out of like 40 or 45 years. So that has kind of been tough. We went on a trip here in a couple weeks ago, or a week ago actually, where I actually took her to go see her mother, who is now in like a long term care facility, and even my grandmother kind of learned some of the stuff that she didn't necessarily know, uh, that my mom was kind of going through, and like how bad her diagnosis was. So that was pretty tough. I was honestly, to be fair, I was actually dreading that trip for ever since my mom came back from Texas, which I want to say was in maybe mid-July. I have been dreading it since then, just because I know everything that my uh, sister and my mom's sister was kind of going through, and like how tough the trip was, because it's difficult because trying to navigate how to care for someone who doesn't really necessarily know where they are when it's your like first time having to do it was extremely difficult. And I think I kind of knew that maybe she might have something going on for probably about a year, and I think that probably was helping a lot with my stress. But between that, um, my work situation, which my work situation I don't think is necessarily unique. I think my problem was I allowed myself to not have any hobbies or free time to myself, or like anything that like I was super passionate about. Like I've been wanting to do photography and video for so long that I think I've talked myself out of it for so long, and like found any imperfections in anything that I've done, and that's kind of put myself down, and that's kind of affected everything else. Which kind of leads to like what my at-home life was kind of like. Um, so going back actually a couple more years, my wife and I moved into a house in Monument, which we were happy with when we first moved in. I mean, there was things I was not necessarily looking forward to. The landscaping in the back was probably the biggest thing that neither one of us really wanted to do. Um, but when the payments were calculated for the house, they, for whatever reason, didn't have any tax rates done, because I guess it was a brand new house and they couldn't like work that in. So when we got our first bill going into the new year, it kind of shot up like $600-700. I can't remember the exact amount, but I think that obviously I think adding the financial stress was another big tough one. So that was, I think that's another thing that's been kind of stinging at me, and kind of like maybe, I wouldn't say burn myself out, but it made me not necessarily want to do things, because I wanted to make sure that the family was taken care of before anything else, um, which is not fair, because we needed to go do things. And honestly, if we had gotten to the point where I was really worried about finances, I probably should have like had that conversation with my wife. But unfortunately, we had that conversation probably about 4 or 5 months ago, or well, actually, no, in May actually, when uh, our youngest was going into like summer camp to kind of be taken care of, because he was too young to be home alone. And then with my job kind of losing the remote work situation, it kind of just transitioned to that whole process, which wasn't helping at all. I think all that coupled with me transitioning to like a 410 schedule to kind of help with the summer camp, I think honestly burned myself out so much that I didn't have any energy left for my family, because my drive in the morning was about 45 to an hour depending on traffic, and then usually it was about an hour and a half by the time I came home. So while I would have gotten off at like 2:30, I was still getting home at 4, so I wasn't able to like prep for dinner and do all that stuff. So that was kind of a huge drain on my, I would say, on my soul, like more than like everything else. I think that one like really hurt. But one of the things that, this has kind of led into the situation involving me and my wife, and that we're going through a divorce, um, which is tough, to be honest. And I think the reason why it's so tough is because I feel like I let it happen instead of being a better communicator, which both of us have said that we kind of struggle with, because I think we're trying to protect each other, and unfortunately, in our effort, I think, to protect each other, we ended up making it worse for each other. So I would try not to bring home the stress of everything that was going on, try not to bring like how worried I was out to my wife, which I think kind of had me bottle it up and then become a little bit more snappy and more agitated around everyone, which, as she puts it, had everyone walking on eggshells, which I've and I think this is the hardest part, is I wanted to be such a good father and husband, that hearing that put me into a pit of self-loathing, like so much more than I already was. It was already kind of my hardest critic to begin with, but hearing that really kind of pushed me down further. So much to the point that she moved out while I was in California with my mom, because she was worried I was going to snap. And honestly, I'm more devastated that I failed her and the kids so much that she felt like I was ever actually mad or angry at them and not just overwhelmed and overstressed, which is like where I was at for the past year and a half, maybe longer. And this is not necessarily like me putting blame on her. This is all me. This is all my doing. I should have gone to therapy a lot longer ago. I mean, the positive thing with my mom going through some of this dementia stuff is it's made us a little bit closer and kind of had me reflecting quite a bit. I was honestly dreading that whole situation because I knew that she had moved out, coming back to our house that we had bought. And I think the toughest thing, to be honest, was walking through the front door and not seeing our family photos on the wall. Not getting a warm hug from her and the kids, which is really what I needed at that point. That was so tough. And then I think I made the world's biggest mistake, honestly, staying at our house. My mind was so all over the place with everything that I couldn't even like sit down and watch YouTube, which is honestly like the stupidest thing I do, that I come home and watch YouTube when I get off work. And it's just a very bad habit that I'm going to try and break. That I couldn't even focus on that. I didn't even want to eat dinner. I honestly had lost all my appetite. I had been running on 3 hours of sleep because my mom kept me up the night before because of her dementia was pretty bad that night before, because I think her anxiety was up with the travel day coming up. I went to bed thinking that I was going to quote unquote do what I always do and tough it out for the betterment of myself and everyone. Unfortunately, I woke up in a cold sweat at around 11:30, 12 o'clock, and I was overcome with so much dread and misery about this whole thing and self-loathing and feeling like the world's biggest failure that I didn't want to live anymore. And even when I tried to think about the kids and my wife, it honestly made it worse, because it just made me feel like I was reinforcing myself that I was a failure because they weren't there. Thankfully, I was scared and I called the crisis line and I got the help that I needed. Unfortunately, it had to come to that whole situation, but I did make the right choice and get help. One of the things that I kind of took away from those first couple of days that I was impatient, why I kind of like worked on myself and got on some meds, was all the stuff that I was doing was the reason why it happened the way that it happened. And that I think we should have, I don't know, communicated much better. I should have let her know, but I think, hindsight's 20/20, obviously. So at this point, that's not really something I can kind of fix at this point. one thing is I'm on meds now, which I feel is definitely taking the edge off. I still feel quite a bit of anxiety and depression. Not insane levels or anything like that, but I definitely feel it spike looking at certain things and being in certain places in the house, at least. I'm actually looking forward to therapy because I think that's going to help me unpack quite a bit about myself and hopefully get me on the right path, at least, because I think that's really going to help. So these videos that I plan on doing are probably going to be more towards me going through my raw emotions and going through therapy and kind of just like explaining the situation that I'm going through and the stuff that I'm kind of working through. Mainly in an effort to kind of be like my self-therapy session, because I do find that when I talk about it, it gets easier. Not much, but easier. But that maybe someone can look out there and see that they're going through a similar situation and like how to avoid it and fix themselves. But I'm mainly doing it for me. Like I want to do this as like a therapy session for me to kind of be a better version of myself, the best version of myself. I want to be the husband and dad that my wife has always wanted me to be, and then the father I want to be what I want my kids to like grow up being or dating, instead of just being a figure. So that's what this is